Before we begin, I am not going to ask you to subscribe to my channel. I believe I have to earn your subscription for you to come back and watch my future videos. However, if you would like to help me, either hit the like or dislike button, because the more likes I see on any video, that means I'm doing something right and I'm bringing value to you, the viewer. Alright, let's get into the video. Apple is having a hard time selling new Macs. In November of 2023, Apple reported that Mac revenue declined by 34% year over year. So what's going on? Why can't Apple convince people to upgrade to the latest series of Macs to increase the revenue and to increase the sales of people buying Macintosh? Well, in this video, I'm just going to give you some of my opinion and observations as to why I believe this is happening and as to when I think people are actually going to be upgrading from, say, Intel or even the M1 series of processors to get a computer that's really going to feel like it's a lot faster than what they already have. To give you some historical context, we have to go back to the middle of the 2010s. In 2016, Apple redesigned the 13 and the 16-inch MacBook Pro. And with that redesign, Apple really chose form over function. The newest MacBooks at the time had the butterfly keyboard, had the touch bar, and the chassis of the new MacBooks were really too thin to dissipate the heat that was coming off of the Intel processors. Now, when it comes to Intel's side of the equation, there were some serious security vulnerabilities known as Spectre and Meltdown. And those vulnerabilities really impacted the performance of those Intel Core series of processors. So Apple had a lot going on that was working against them, and eventually users got so fed up with the butterfly keyboard in particular, Apple was forced to extend the warranty period for those Macs so they can fix all of the issues with the butterfly keyboard. And that generation of Macintosh, towards the latter end of the Intel era, a lot of people were really upset and pissed off at Apple. And as a result, Apple knew that they had to switch to a new architecture with Apple's silicon. Apple basically changed and re-architectured everything when they started to use their own custom silicon. In the Intel days, various functions of the chip would actually be farmed out to discrete chips on the motherboard. When Apple Silicon entered the picture, they integrated things like the SSD controller, the unified memory, the graphics unit, and the Neural Engine. All of those discrete components came together on the singular chip, with the unified memory also being built on board, and as a result, Apple was able to see performance gains that they were never able to see when they were using Intel and the x86 architecture. In order to maximize performance and efficiency, Apple had switched from x86, which used complex instruction set computing, over to ARM64, which has a different design philosophy and implementation based on RISC, or reduced instruction set computing. Now, RISC and ARM processors are what powers the most power efficient devices such as cell phones. So Qualcomm's Snapdragon processor, Samsung's Exynos processors, and the chips that are found in Raspberry Pis, very low power, however, they do need to bring out performance as well. All of that is based on the ARM instruction set computing architecture, and as a result, because of this fundamental shift and change in design philosophy, that's how Apple Silicon was able to get as much performance gains as it had been able to accomplish. When the M1 system on a chip came along, it delivered on two of Apple's biggest promises: performance and battery life. Now, when it came to battery life, Intel based MacBooks were getting about 8 to 10 hours. With Apple Silicon, they had effectively doubled the amount of battery life to 18 or 20 hours. When it came to performance, people were finding that the $1,000 M1 MacBook Air in certain benchmarks was meeting the same performance of a 16-inch MacBook Pro with the Core i9 processor that cost 3 times as much. So people were not only blown away by the battery life and power efficiency of the chip, they were also getting blown away by the performance that the M1 was delivering. And that in itself is where people decided that the M1 processor, even though it's currently 3.5 years old, is good enough. The reviews for the M1 Mac Mini, the M1 MacBook Air, and the 13-inch M1 MacBook Pro were overwhelmingly positive. And before I picked up this M1 MacBook Air, I actually had a 13-inch Intel-based MacBook Pro. And that system ran hot, it was loud because of the fans, and it couldn't perform at the levels that I expected it to. So when I saw the initial reviews for the M1 Air, I was totally blown away, and that's why I decided to upgrade to the M1 MacBook Air. And when I had the 13-inch MacBook Pro, I only had it for about 5 months. So I was so sick of it during those 5 months, that's when I decided to go to the M1 Air. Now, when it came to the professionals, I think they were experiencing the same thing. They were really fed up with the 15 and the 16-inch Intel-based MacBook Pro. And when the M1 Pro chip and the M1 Max chip came out, that gave them all of the motivation to jump over and switch to Apple Silicon. And as a result, they were seeing the same benefits: better battery life, better performance, lower thermal or better thermal efficiency. All of that came together both in the M1 base model as well as the M1 Pro and the M1 Max chips. And because the performance was just so damn good, there was no compelling reason for any of us to upgrade to, say, the M2 or the M3 system on a chip. Because in day-to-day performance and what it does in your workflow, there isn't that much of a difference between, say, an M1 and an M3. Now, in graphs and benchmarks, you may see a 20 or 30% difference. But when it comes to real-world use, scrubbing the timeline, exporting videos, exporting, say, 500 photos in Lightroom, all of those things on the M1 MacBook chip can be just almost as good as the M3. And as a result, because the M1 is such a good chip, it's based on a new architecture. It's based purely on efficiency because all of those things came together on the M1. There is really no compelling reason to upgrade to the M3. And this is the dilemma that Apple is facing right now. They can't get people off of the M1 because it's so good, and the performance difference doesn't justify spending another $2,000 or $2,500 on the MacBook Pro if you're only going to save a couple of minutes on the export time. So that's where we stand. The M1 chip was just so good. There is no justification how Apple can say, we want you to spend $2,000 or $2,500 for the latest M3 MacBook Pro. So unless something really big comes along, unless the M4, the M5 chip delivers really breakthrough performance, I believe Apple is still going to have a long hard sell trying to get people to buy the latest and greatest. And as a result, that's what's going on, and that's why Apple is not moving Macs outside of the door. So the M3 processor is good. If you've been holding off on Intel for such a long time, and only now you're thinking about going to the M3, you're going to be blown away. But in terms between the M1 and the M3 chip, you're not going to see that much of a difference, and that's why Macs are down year over year. All right, that's about it. Peace.